going to examine the development of labor laws, the things that really pushed right after the turn of the last century, about the 1930s and 40s, we had a lot of changes that we had in the world of labor. So looking overall on the actual aspect of development of labor laws, the Supreme Court got the message that we need to sit down and start looking on the aspect of the scope of interstate commerce, because unions started being past the state line. They started doing multiple states. So therefore, they were upheld in the aspect of who has jurisdiction. When a union goes past it or a company goes past interstate lines, all of a sudden now it becomes interstate commerce. So you have a lot of things that were included by Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration, because the fact that he created a thing called the New Deal. Part of the New Deal was the Fair Labor Standards Act, or the FLSA. Whenever you're dealing with employment law, this is part of the overall slang we still talk about, the FLSA. Nobody calls it the Fair Labor Standards Act. We call it the FLSA. That also created a thing called the National Labor Relations Act, the Wagner Act, but really the main benefit of the National Labor Relations Act was the National Labor Relations Board. I use that term benefit loosely. It depends which side of the table that you're working on at the moment. But that being said, the National Labor Relations Board is the federal board that makes a decision as to whether or not there's enough interest based upon the number of cards that are turned in by people interested in forming a union to have a union election. So anytime you'll have that out there, the National Labor Relations Board is populated by appointees, political appointees, and a lot of it really just depends who's in the office and what majority is on that board, Republican, Democrat, or whatever that possibly may be. But the reality is that board makes the decision of, yes, we have enough cards. No, we don't have enough cards, because then they hold the election, and then so the NLRB decides if there should be enough interest for an election, and then they also determine if it was done properly. So you'll see that, and by the time you're done, you have certain rules that management can and can't do in the election. Management has the right to state their opinions as to whether or not this is good or bad. They have several different aspects. The union does as well. And so it just depends on the aspect of what's going on with the NLRB. It's still around. It still plays a major role in unionization or non-unionization, depending upon the decision-making process they have. Another aspect is that unions flourish, and then it led to a lot of expensive strikes. People had to pay massive amounts of money. Businesses shut down. People were out of work for periods of time. I recall growing up in a household where I had a father who was part of a union, and they went on strike for about 7 months. It was really difficult, but with that, they had funds and everything else to take care of that. There was all kinds of difficulties they had, but the reality of it really came down to is that strikes can be very difficult for everybody, but especially they're meant to hurt the employer in the process as well. And the unions also had a lot of really interior unfair labor practices going on, where they had a lot of corruption going on, led by the famous Jimmy Hoffa case. Jimmy Hoffa is a legendary union organizer who disappeared one night after having dinner at the Fox and Hounds restaurant in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. I've had dinner multiple times there. I wasn't part of it, but rumor has it that Jimmy Hoffa is buried underneath the end zone of a New York Giants football stadium, or in the median of I-94 or whatever. It's legendary. But there was so much corruption in the unions that they started coming out with different rules that sit down there and eliminate the corruption. So the Landrum-Griffin Act really guaranteed internal democracy, and its purpose was to reduce the union corruption and its linkage to organized crime, which was clearly there. You also have a framework where we have several states. You'll see here on the map on the PowerPoint slide in blue, we have all these different states are called right-to-work states. In these states, people, even if there is a union in the plant, and the union, it really says, we want to have everybody organized, you do not have to be part of that union. So pay attention to that part also. There's 4 primary statutes we need to know about. the NLRA was really coming across on the FLSA. So you have that. So the NLRB is the board that guides it all. You also have the Norris LaGuardia Act passed in 1932. It really endorsed the collective bargaining process, established the three different points, which I hope that you know. It really comes down to wages, hours, and working conditions. Anytime you talk union, think that in your head that they have a right to negotiate that aspect. It reduced the use of injunctions to stop workplace disputes. They had to turn more to collective bargaining agreements. It authorized union strike funds. It voided the yellow dog contracts. I like orange cat better. Dogs are really nice. Okay. And then it brought in antitrust immunity, and it paved the way for the NLRA and the Wagner Act 3 years later. This was really foundational on actually establishing a lot of the different rules that we had. The Wagner Act really came along and acted like an amendment to the aspect of what it really established. By establishing the National Labor Relations Board, labor calls it the Magna Carta of the Wagner Act. Yes, it really wasn't a Magna Carta or even close, but it was a good thing for the unions in regards to that. It gave them the right to bargain collectively, strike, form unions. It also defined a series of unfair labor practices. In the industry, we call it a ULP. It just depends how bad either side is. Both sides, when they utter the words, that's a ULP, you say it with disdain because the other side has done something sneaky and tricky and you want to get back at them. Not that I would ever be involved in such a thing. But anyhow, that being said, it really says you can't interfere with, restrain, or coerce employees in exercising their rights. If they want to file a grievance, and we'll talk more about a grievance, but a grievance is somebody's belief that part of the collective bargaining agreement was violated. They're saying, underneath this article, section 11.7, it says the following, and my supervisor didn't do that. Sometimes, though, some of the grievances that come out of that is they're just angry at the workplace or their boss, so they file a grievance even though there's no basis for it. It just depends where you're at and where your job steward is, and we'll talk about all those different aspects shortly. A ULP, you can't interfere with the formation of a labor organization. You can't discriminate in hiring. You can't terminate somebody because they're part of a union. You can't do any of these things. You can't refuse to bargain with employer representatives. In theory, the union should be focusing on, over here on the left-hand side, a community of interest, a bargaining unit, making certain everybody's represented, and having a shop steward. Now, in a union, you'll have union officers, you'll have a union president, but you also have a job, even in professional settings, they called it a shop steward. A shop steward actually is probably the most powerful role in a union because they work side by side with the employee. If somebody is really frustrated with their supervisor, they think the supervisor is picking on them or whatever, they're violating the contract. The first step is the shop steward is talked to by the employee, and a lot of times the shop steward accompanies the employee to talk to the supervisor. The shop steward really is the go-between and the face of the union in an awful lot of situations. It's, from a union perspective, it's very powerful. You have a collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, the labor agreement, the contract. There's a lot of name for it, but it's a negotiated contract between the labor, or the union, and the management. The industrial union, and it's sometimes called industrial. It's a union. It could be whatever. It could be a craft union. You'll have all these different things. Regardless, they will sit down and represent the members that have voted to put them in office. And even if sometimes even if somebody didn't vote, they get rolled into the union and have to pay union fees because it's a closed shop, because they're not one of let me back up over here, our right to work state. So you have that. So if you're one of the ones that's beige, you might be forced to join a union, but there's other things that we have out of it now also as well, because there's been a couple of changes from the Supreme Court. A lot of the craft unions, they were organized originally by the silversmiths, the shoemakers, and so on, but a union a lot of times will have a business agent. The business agent may represent multiple different unions in a region, so you'll have that. It depends how organized the union is. The employer organizing concerns. The employers, they don't want unions. They want to just make decisions on their own. They want to make bottom line decisions. We can save money by getting rid of all those people in human resources. We'll outsource. Yeah, we'll hire a company and fire those 17 people over there. You know what? Let's get rid of all the groundskeepers. Let's bring in contractors to do that. Let's relocate and go move our employees down to Antarctica because of the fact it's a cool place to go to. Did you catch Antarctica and cool place? Anyway, so you have all that going on in the aspect of making decisions, but a union considers, whoa, hold it. You got a collective bargaining agreement. You can't do it because of this. You can't do it because of this. No, you can't outsource this work. It's our work. It's part of the contract. No, you'll have all that. So you have this contention going on between the two sides, and it just depends as to what your role is, what is defined, and what is the intent, big picture-wise, that you have. A player looking to sell their business, the business could look less appealing if a union's in place because a union has say, and a lot of times they can actually have power within the organization. Some businesses have gone belly up because of the fact that unions had so much power and management didn't do anything to stop them gaining power, and so eventually the business just folded. So pay attention to all the development of labor laws. If you're involved in administering the employment law at your place and you have a union, pay attention, read the articles, read every single section of it. You should have parts of it memorized to some extent so you can respond well, because that is part of the world. And also make certain that you know about the NLRB, that there's right to work states and what the difference is. Collective bargaining, it's the union and management meeting together. What is the labor contract as a final result of that? What are negotiations, and what a ULP is, or an unfair labor practice. This is all some of the foundation of the development of our labor laws. Take care.